Hello and welcome to the Masters Swimming Podcast, available on all the major podcast platforms and on YouTube. So I'm Joe Malone, and joining me this week from across the pond is Matt Richmond. And Matt, yours is, an interesting situation really, because you're studying to be a physical therapist out in Michigan, but you're also the coach of Northampton Masters Swimming Club, albeit mostly a virtual one.
Yeah, that's right. Hi, Joe. Thanks for having me on. Pleasure. So yeah, I'm currently studying out in the US and looking to be a physical therapist in my future career, but also still have all the responsibilities that go with you know, planning, running, organizing everything that goes along with the Masters squad along at Northampton Swimming Club. So it's an interesting situation. I'm sure not one that many clubs or squads or even coaches find themselves in, sort of working remotely from across the other side of the world. But it's definitely unique and presents its own challenges, but one that I really enjoy doing.
No, for sure. Well, it is very interesting. It is one thing that I do obviously want to talk to you about today, but there's a few things I want to talk about. Firstly, what it's like to be a coach, obviously, of an English masters club out in the US as you are. But also I want to explore where masters swimming, where it's at in the eyes of the wider swimming world, really. I know we've talked about this off air. We are a tight-knit bunch, but the feeling is that we're quite underappreciated at times. And sometimes that can come within a club's own setup. But first, let's talk about your coaching role. So you're 22. You're studying at university in the US, as we've established. You're a swimmer yourself, and you've been coaching for around 5 years now. You started out coaching at age group squad. You've now moved on to coach the master squad at Northampton. So I guess first and foremost, what was it that appealed to you about the master setup?
Um, so originally it was actually more of a vacancy that sort of came up within the club. All the other squads had, their full-time coaching assignments, and masters were kind of left on a rotational basis of who was available and who was free. That was whilst alongside I was still coaching some of the age group squads. And then sort of we came to the conclusion that it'd be nice to have some sort of regularity for those guys in our master squad, and myself. And actually, when he's back home from university in England, there's another individual who called Jake Townsend. Just give him a little mention, who actually does uh, tie in with me and do quite a lot of the work. So I know when he was home this winter break that we sort of came into tandem on what we had the group doing. But yeah, I'm responsible for the majority of what goes on with that squad. And yeah, I think as I grew to learn and understand about them as individuals, them as athletes, their varying needs and desires, because I think I find that we have some people who swim for social aspects, some who swim for triathlon purposes, some who are really, really excelling in master swimming specifically, with British records and medaling in their age group. So a lot of variety to cater for. And I think the fact that actually with them all being adults with working jobs, it just makes them that bit more relatable as human beings. You can talk to them on the same level, have a genuine conversation with them, and also, I think there's a bit more of a light-hearted environment, as most of these people, when you're an age group swimmer, it's easy to feel, forced into it by your parents or not really have a choice some of the time. But, all of these people are here because they want to be and with their different goals. And it's definitely an exciting environment and a challenge to cater for all those goals. So that's definitely something that, appealed when it became a more permanent role for me.
Yeah, no, sure. And what's the feedback like from your swimmers? Like, do they mind that you're physically not there on a session? And is there a kind of a two-way sort of feedback stream between you and the swimmers? Can they contact you in any way? And can you get back to them and watch any videos of them training?
Yeah, so it's very tough to sort of get that visual aspect to representation. However, I do check in with swimmers around the squad sort of on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. just see how are things. Is there any feedback from the group in general? Anything that we would like to change? Constantly sort of, obviously when I'm sending sessions through to the other coaches that are then taking those sessions, sort of how did they get on? Was there anything they struggled with? Anything that you would suggest, seeing them training tonight that they could do with some extra time devoted towards, or do they seem a bit fed up of anything? So I think it definitely does make it a little bit more challenging, but the number one message that I do get is, they really appreciate the fact that, whilst I'm in the middle of a degree and still trying to swim myself, and amongst everything else, that I'm still putting in the same effort that that I would be at home. The only difference is I can't physically be there, but when they go to competitions, events, if there's a live stream, I'll pull it up as much as I can. I'll check in on results following the meet, look at their splits, probably ideally have a phone call with them about their races and see how they feel about things, what they'd like to do moving forward, what they would have done differently, those kind of things. So I really do try and stay as engaged as I can be from the other side of the world. And there are limitations there. Like, I can't help someone technically improve their stroke without having to, visually see it. But again, they're more than welcome, as they know, to get in touch with me anytime, or even if it's they do some recording themselves at training and send a video through saying, hey, can you help me out here, because I feel a bit, not intimidated, but feel like I can't ask the other coaches that aren't really our coaches for some advice and some help. So yeah, I think it's definitely a good communication pathway going on, especially given the limitations that are there. But they all really, still appreciate the work that I put in, and definitely I think as a group we have a really good relationship and a good feeling in that environment, even if I know a few of them do miss me quite dearly. But yeah, it's definitely got its challenges, but we managed to work our way around them as best we can.
No, that sounds good. I know a lot of kind of online PTs work in a similar way now, where they ask you to kind of film yourself performing, for example, a squat, and then you'd send them that video, and they would give you feedback that way. So that's that's an interesting route you can take. How many swimmers do you have in your squad?
So registered to the squad, we have about 40 to 45. And we probably average across the 3 sessions that they have available each week. We probably average anywhere from 15 to 25 each night. Obviously, with people's different work commitments and schedules, then it's hard to get everyone attending. And like I say, with everyone's different goals, some people who are more triathlon based may only have time to swim once a week, and the other 2 days, cycling or running. So we do get a good handful of, probably a core group, I'd say about 8 to 10 swimmers who do attend pretty much all 3 sessions a week. So some faces are a little bit harder to put names to just off the top of your head when you don't get to see them all the time, especially those that are joining the squad whilst I'm away, and sort of come back over my uni break when I get to go home, and I'm like, oh, can we introduce each other and that kind of thing. But yeah, I think we've been continually growing over the past sort of 2.5 years, where I think that the masters group has been my primary responsibility at Northampton, and it's been really nice to see people coming in for their trials and immediately saying, yeah, I've had a great time, I'd like to join permanently. So probably looking towards the 50 members mark shortly, which will be really good.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And so have you had any sort of successes then, or anything that you're particularly proud of since you took over as the Masters coach, in terms of like people racing, or maybe even just people coming back into the pool after many years, or learning how to swim as an adult?
Yeah, I think we've had examples of all 3 of those that you've given, and like I said, Jake alongside myself has been a critical part in that. At one point, they were fortunate enough to have both of us on the pool side, and we would sort of, one would work with what we would say are our more high-end master swimmers, athletes, and the other one of us would work with those who are maybe new to the sport, or learning how to swim as an adult. And I think to be able to cater to both extremes, or again, I've seen so many people in the time that I was at home over this summer break who have actually just reinvigorated themselves with the sport, not necessarily been jumping back into the sport after a long time out or anything, but sort of redevelop the passion that they had as a child before they took some time away. And I think we sent 7 or 8 swimmers to our regional festival I want to say it was in December of last year. It was a little while ago, November or December of this year. And before, we would only have maybe two or three from the group who were willing to be competitive and go and race. And we even had a couple of representatives in our arena league team this year, which is really good to see them getting integrated into what we would call age group competition, or just with the rest of the club. And I think having that unity along with that sense of achievement for them, because I think the feedback towards competition from a lot of my swimmers I get is, oh, but if it's not specifically a masters competition, I don't want to go and be surrounded by children. Well, as you know, Joe, there's not an abundance of masters competitions that you can find locally, or just pick, and this weekend we're going here, this weekend we're going there. It's very sparse on the calendar. So I've encouraged them as much as they can, whether it's again what is labeled as an age group competition or not, to go and gain that experience there. I know we have 4 or 5 of them have entered our county championships, which is really good to see. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I think over the past 2 years, we've seen 3 or 4 people come in who had no idea how to swim, or couldn't do anything other than backstroke, for example, or actually had a couple of people with life-changing injuries such as strokes, or like heart attacks come in, and sort of helps have them as part of their rehabilitation. So we cover a lot of bases, which is really nice. And I think as a squad and a swimming club, we are welcome to all kind of backgrounds and needs, and we'll cater to those as best we can. So it's definitely a unique part of master swimming, which you maybe don't see in age group swimming.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And that leads us really nicely onto the recognition piece then that we want to talk about. So, us swimmers and coaches, we love the Masters community. It's a great place. We've got volunteers who sit on the Masters working group, and they act as a voice for Masters swimming, and have direct contact with Swim England and other associations. We've also got vocal advocates within the community who step up when they feel it's needed. But given your age and the fact that you've kind of not long come from an age group environment yourself, both as a coach and as a swimmer, what are your kind of early perceptions on the general recognition that master swimming gets from above, and where do you think the downfalls are?
Yeah, that's a really sort of intriguing piece, in the sense that some feel like master swimming is almost sort of just a sideshow, where I think a lot of people forget that whether you're finishing 20th, whether you're winning medals, breaking British records, all of these people dedicate time after a long day at work, a long day caring for kids, to then go and swim. And I think that, first of all, is something that I think a lot of people forget, that you guys in this sport choose to do it because you love it. It's not, I don't know a single master swimmer that has the incentive, oh, I can be professional, this is my job, I can get paid to do it out of the love of the sport, and the sense of, let's say, community achievement that comes from it. And further harking on that recognition point, so I was again fortunate enough to be at Masters Nationals in Sheffield this October.
Yeah.
And I think and it was my first one. as a coach, not as a swimmer, but it was my first attendance to, a national level masters meet. And I wouldn't say it shocked me, but I think if you look at, any other national competition for the age group or senior swimmers, there's medal presentations, there's sort of ceremonies to recognize people's achievements. Whereas, yes, the horns and the announcement for the records, the British, European, and world records, is a really nice touch. And I think, as you've said on previous podcasts, people love that. It's really, really good thing to hear. But recognition for winning medals, I think for someone who, maybe has had a difficult journey and they finally, achieved a goal that they'd set out on for the past 20 years, or someone who, had done something they never thought they could do for the first time, just receiving that recognition for their medal in front of the whole pool is one example that I think would go such a long way in actually recognizing to others what, because we're all still human beings and swimmers at the end of the day. The difference is we are just a little bit older than those who are winning medals at nationals at 14 and 15.
Yeah.
And I think in a way, like I, go back to the fact that you guys work a full day and then go training, or, you wake up early in the morning and then work a full day. It's that extra bit of, oh, these guys really do put in their time and their effort. And I think Swim England are doing a pretty decent job at, if you go on the Masters page on Swim England, the news reports that they write and the information that they put up is really, really great. And I think I do understand that from a publicity point of view that, Masters swimming to a lot of people is probably not as exciting, but is that because that's the way it's been portrayed? Or is it genuinely less exciting? Because to me, seeing someone who is 61 years old competitively go head to head with someone who is 34 years old, in my mind, is extremely exciting. And I'm sure most other people who, see the fact that someone can do something ridiculous that you thought was never possible at 55 years old. I think that honestly brings a level of excitement that age group swimming doesn't. Of course, it's brilliant to watch all these kids do, worldly things that, again, people didn't think was possible. But I just think again, harping on the word recognition, you guys and us as masters, athletes, coaches, swimmers, don't get recognized or respected quite the amount that I think is deserved, because why should your achievements at 45, at 32 be recognized differently to someone who is, just starting or, midway through their journey as a swimmer?
Yeah. No, I get that. And listen, every club that has both an age group setup and a master squad, within the same kind of complex, they'll each have a different situation in terms of the relationship and how they align. But do you think that those clubs do enough generally for their master swimmers in terms of what master swimmers need? So that's in terms of, say, pool time, competition time, general recognition, etc.
Yeah, I think at Northampton, we've done a really good job lately of trying to integrate the masters group that bit more and give them more recognition via, social media posts, or, I guess what you'd call airtime, and just sort of valuing those athletes a bit more. For example, like I mentioned earlier, having a couple of them swim in that arena league, you probably won't find many clubs who have master swimmers who steady the ship for their swimming club at a competition like arena leagues. And I think that's something that I, as a coach, and, we as a masters group were really proud of last year. But I think a lot of clubs do underestimate or don't value their masters athletes quite as much as they should be. Yeah. I think it is very easy to undervalue a group who, in other people's eyes, they're there to stay fit, stay healthy, to socialize. But I think not that this should be the only turning point as to where that boundary lies. But for example, we have a couple of swimmers who, are pushing British record holders, have just earned their first British records, who, are competing on a national level really quite strongly. And unfortunately, it's not always, anyone's fault or problem. But as a masters group, we would love some more water time, but it's very, very hard to come by. And I think, again, coming from that previously an age group swimmer, now a senior/master swimmer perspective, of course, if you're producing the next Ben Proud or the next Anna Hopkin, the next Freya Anderson, that's really exciting for your swimming club. And also for those swimmers who, are on their swimming journey. However, when you have people who could potentially go on and break world records in the masters setting, to me, that should be equally valued and seen as exciting and a really excellent achievement. I think sometimes we get caught up in chasing, producing the next Ben Proud or the next Freya Anderson, the next James Guy, that we do sometimes forget our master swimmers and actually the value, not just from a swimming standpoint, but actually, especially with COVID, a lot of clubs struggle or are still struggling financially.
Yeah.
And these are people who, pay their fees with their own money. It's not coming out of their parents' pockets like most age group swimmers. And, if they're choosing to spend their money to swim at your swimming club, that's their choice. They're completely free to be entitled, I think, to, requesting an extra hour of water time or something like that. So I think it can be challenging to find the correct, I'm not going to use the term boundaries, but the correct balance between, your sort of direction towards your masters setting and your masters group, and then the rest of your swimming club. It can be a really difficult challenge, but I think a lot of the time, how many hours are you guys getting at RTW, Joe?
Well, at RTW, we get 2 hours a week. So 1 hour on a Tuesday night, 1 hour on a Thursday night. But I have just moved house. We've relocated back to Derbyshire. And last night I went for my first session with Matlock District Swimming Club. And that's quite an interesting setup there because the Masters squad has 4 sessions a week. So 2 1-hour sessions. There's an hour and a half session tonight. And then there's an hour and 3/4, I think, on Sunday. And they're all within an age group squad as well. So you kind of get 2 to 3 lanes. So again, it's quite a different setup because RTW are solely a masters club. They're not part of the junior or age group squad, should I say. So just the difference there alone is quite interesting. I think being associated with an age group squad gives you probably a bit more pool time.
Yeah, definitely. I think, having listened to previous editions of your podcast, I know City of Cardiff do a really good job at integrating some of their master swimmers into their top performance group. And I think, for me, that's where, labeling someone as a master swimmer just sort of, in my opinion, is slightly outdated. I think showing someone the respect for their out and out talent or performance is what, it should be, if they're willing to, be able to commit to the hours and the training, and they are on par with swimmers in, your age group squads. Of course, we have the safeguarding processes that need to be, carried out and gone through, but assuming there's no issues there, I think, I think you in your new setting you're gonna thrive, and it's a new and exciting change for yourself. And having some of those younger kids say next to you when you're swimming provides that extra bit of integration with the club as a whole, and can provide the master swimmers at those sessions with some extra challenges, sort of like, okay, I'm not going to let these kids beat me today. But yeah, I think combining that age group and masters program to an extent is beneficial for all parties. I think seeing, as a 13 or 14-year-old, seeing someone who's 30 or 35 push me every day and absolutely rock it, day in, day out, and still be a really good swimmer slash athlete would keep me motivated, not necessarily at that age to be striving for the best performance, but to stay in the sport. And I think, part of what you get taught in PE or, Swim England's coaching and teaching courses is that we want people to stay in swimming for a long time. It doesn't have to be competitive, but we want people to stay in the sport for a long time, because if you stay in the sport, you may not necessarily find that competitive edge, but you might wake up one day at 60 years old still swimming and think, what, I think I can go for that. I can maybe win a medal at, nationals or regionals this year. And it's those things where I think we do underappreciate the value that a masters squad can have to a swimming club as a whole, and those age group swimmers from not only a performance point of view, but a longevity point of view as well, to learn to love the sport and not just make it all about, winning everything when you're a kid.
Yeah, I'm glad you've said that, actually, because, for me, and I've said this a couple of times on the podcast before, but it always comes back to two things for me. On the one hand, you've got, most age group swimmers there'll be an age group swimmer for 10 years, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. But a master swimmer can be a master swimmer for decades. So they give a lot, you're a master swimmer for many more years. And then you touched on this earlier. The other thing that I come back to is the choice element. So as an age group swimmer, you might not even love swimming, but your parents want you to go because it's healthy, it's good for your health and well-being and your fitness and all that kind of stuff. You might like it, but you might not love it. But as a master swimmer, it's totally your choice. Nobody's forcing you to go, and you're paying the bill. Your parents aren't paying the bill. And I think also from that kind of consumer point of view as well, as a master swimmer, we had the swimsuit guy on recently, and he talked about some, great kind of racing suits that you could buy. That got me thinking, I might buy a new suit myself. But if you're a kid, you have to have that conversation with your mum and dad. Or can I have a new race suit? And they could very easily say, sorry, son or daughter, no. And that's kind of conversation over. But we have the potential to be consumers in this market, and so that's great for not only Swim England but for manufacturers as well. And of course, speaking about associations such as Swim England, when we go and compete again, we choose to compete. We give our weekends up. Sometimes pay an awful lot of money if we're traveling a long way. You mentioned earlier actually about the Swim England website, and I was looking the other day at the competition calendar, and I know that a lot of competitions get added throughout the year, and some counties or regions, they're not quite ready yet to put their competition on. But I was looking at the first 3 or 4 months, and it just looks like all of the competitions that exist in the first sort of quarter of the year, they're all in the corners of this country. So you either have to go to the Isle of Wight or to Cornwall or to Devon, and you just think, wow, if you don't live anywhere near there, you either don't compete at all or you travel miles.
Yeah, and that's why I think, as much as it makes some of them uncomfortable, I've tried to encourage them. Okay, let's go to a lower level age group swimming meet, or I encourage them to enter county championships, because unfortunately, as you know, with times that you swim at masters competitions, they're not eligible to enter Olympic trials or anything like that. So
is that something you think that should change? Do you think that it should be a licensed meet?
I think so. I think so, because like you say, up till about April, you'll be traveling hundreds and hundreds of miles. If you, like us in the Midlands, and yourself now, if you wanted to go to somewhere, maybe having to travel all the way up to Huddersfield or all the way down to sort of Bristol, it's especially when, as working adults, your weekends are your time to relax and be off work. Like you say, that comes back to it being a choice.
Yeah.
But I think it's almost different to it's almost so similar to a normal age group swimming competition. You want to hire the pool, you pay for the pool, you have entry fees for the events which cover that hire. You need to find officials. I have never really understood why more clubs don't put on masters events. However, going back to the original question, I think, where you get people who swim at completely ratified events such as World Masters Championships or European Masters,
Yeah.
and then whatever time they swim is not eligible to be used, for maybe British Championships, or even if they wanted to try and qualify for the Summer Nationals in July and August. I think at a competition where the rules, the FINA rules still apply, just because it's labeled Masters, you should be able to enter. For example, there's one lady at our swimming club. I won't name her, as I know she'll get a little bit shy about it, but she went 29 in the 50 fly and 104 in the 100 fly, and I think
Amazing.
105 in the 100 back at Masters in October. And she's almost getting towards that 40-year-old category in the next few years. But she right now, at least at Northampton, is the quickest female we have in those kind of events. And for her not to be able to sort of legitimately go and enter county championships because she, those times were set at a Masters, I think is slightly ludicrous. And same for all of us, across the country. If counties was something that appealed and we really wanted to do it, oh, sorry, do you have any times from a normal competition? No, well, you can't enter. I think absolutely. It was, all the swimming competitions, Masters or age group, swam under the same rules in the same conditions. The only exception being, I know, from a certain age group up, I think it's 80 years plus, you get to have slightly different rules for, breaststroke and like Old English backstroke.
Yeah, of course.
But realistically, I don't see those individuals entering an age group swimming meet. So I definitely think that it's something that should be looked at, because I have one or two swimmers which actually are sort of biting their lips and gritting their teeth about the fact that they can't do it, first of all, and secondly that actually to challenge themselves against some age group swimmers who are nationally qualified or placing in finals at regional level, they really want to challenge themselves against those kind of people, but never have the opportunity to do it because of rules implemented such as this. So it's definitely something which I think could be improved on from the swimming community's point of view, because I don't know who implements that rule, whether it's necessarily the main sector of British swimming, Swim England, or whether it's something decided by the Masters sector. So yeah,
I don't think it's something that's decided by the master sector, I can tell you that. You kind of touched on this before, but do you think the reason that age group swimming is kind of higher in the pyramid, as it were, is because it's seen as like an academy for the next British swimming athletes?
I think so. And generally, what I would say the trend I see is that a lot of your big performance age group clubs, such as ourselves, Nova Centurion, I can't say for sure, but places like Deventio, for example, I know that because they are so set up towards producing your next talent in the world of swimming, I think, unfortunately, that's where, again, touching back to earlier, maybe the Masters side of things does get forgotten slightly. Whereas, for example, you've just moved to your new club, and I think even though you're combined with the age group squad for your training sessions, as a swimming club, it's probably slightly smaller, slightly less, performance centralized on the age group side. It's not one of those names where you'd recognize it nationally for age group swimming, and I think they're evidently more I would guess lenient with incorporating you guys and having you guys as having equal opportunity. And I think that is one of the limitations that we find in these bigger age group clubs, that again they're looking for the next superstar. And I think that the Masters aspect can get forgotten, even though to me some of my swimmers are superstars in the Masters swimming world. and unfortunately that just gets forgotten a little bit.
Yeah. Speaking of that kind of well, I guess the recognition piece as we have throughout all of this really is, I mean, you mentioned Matlock, the club that I've just joined, and it's not necessarily a recognised name that produces great swimmers, but that's because being in Derbyshire, we have Daventio nearby. So Matlock essentially is one of the feeder clubs that
Mm-hmm.
feeds into a Daventio that then takes the best swimmers. And thinking of that from a masters level, quite an interesting debate that we've had down in Kent for the last kind of 4 or 5 years. Obviously, that's where I've been living for the last or for that time. There was a club that was set up called Kent Weald, and the whole premise behind that was basically around taking the best swimmers to make really good relay teams, so that when we go to nationals or Europeans or worlds, there's the potential for records or at least for medals, because that, you know, a lot of the clubs in Kent at a masters level are not necessarily high performing. We don't necessarily produce the best swimmers, probably because we don't get loads of pool time. But that's caused a lot of controversy because Kent Weald aren't a club in their own right in terms of the fact that they offer training to the swimmers. So you could be swimming for RTW Masters, but then you go and compete for Kent Weald, not for RTW Masters, and you can understand that's probably causing some controversy, lots of controversy actually. And I sort of see it from both sides really, because if you're somebody who wants to go for a record and you feel like there's a better opportunity going with Kent Weald, I can understand from that point of view. But from the loyalty point of view, and you know, you're a coach, right? So you think
Yeah.
the coach for RTW must be thinking, God, I'm coaching this guy or this lady, and then they're just leaving me at competition and going to swim for someone else. Where do you sit on that kind of debate? Because that is a genuinely very good way of producing really good, say, relay teams. But is it ethical?
So it's funny you should mention that, because I, as a young swimmer, actually found myself in a similar kind of situation. So I was swimming at a much smaller club locally, um, and we had a sort of a separate county talent pathway that Northampton ran, and eventually it was sort of, if you really wanted to succeed, you made the step over to Northampton full time. And I think around the age of about 13 or 14, just before I fully transitioned over, swimming 3 or 4 times a week with Northampton, and then 2 or 3 times a week with my original home club, who really had given me that foundation to
Yeah.
go on and succeed. And I know, to begin with, when I was a little bit younger, about 11 or 12, it was very much, you swim with us once a week, but you compete for us. Your home club does everything else.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know how the feeder program in Derbyshire works for their age group kids with Daventio, but that was my experience of it. And I think I know my home club were very this isn't fair. We do a lot of things for him, and he has to go and race for them, and we don't get any recognition at that regional level, which at the time I was at as an 11 and 12-year-old, before stepping up to that national level later on. And then, on the other side, you do have that very good argument that we are the performance, club slash, pathway around here. And if you really want to go and succeed, this is the best way. And I think from a master's point of view, with a very similar situation, I think if you're just asking someone to be dragged away from their home club just to compete, and all the hard work goes in at their home or original club, and then they just race under a different name, I think that's wrong. I think ethically that is wrong.
Yeah.
I think if there was some aspect of everyone who either met the criteria or decided to go and join this new performance club,
Yeah.
we're training together 2-3 times a week, I think that's totally valid. Valid, credible, not dishonest in any way,
Because
because
then you're setting up a legitimate club, aren't you, and offering
yes,
training and
yeah,
coaching, etc.
yeah, and then it doesn't fall onto anyone's responsibility, like you say, to take credit for anything. It's a legitimate working organization where they have their own coaches, they pay for their own pool hire, everything's done in a systematic way, and in the aim to get the best out of everyone. Not you're pooling all those athletes together who have the same goal or vision. For example, like you say, the way it worked previously was that you swam at your home club and you all went together to try and break records and swim relays for those that, thought it was ethically okay and went forward with it. But there's a massive difference between doing that and actually, okay, well, let's have our 4 or 5 relay swimmers. Obviously you might select one over the other. Train together 2 times a week, and then they can better each other, better themselves, and have that good relationship rather than having to. I imagine it's quite awkward if you show up for a relay with 3 people that you've never met, never spoken to. You don't know anything about each other. So, and having been at Masters Nationals this October and having the odd swimmer from other local clubs in my county in Northamptonshire, they were not desperate, but they said we'd really appreciate if we could get together with you guys, once or twice a week. And I think something like that, just to be able to bring, again, what is a wider community, smaller communities through various different clubs and bring it into a larger, wider community just once a week. And again, as adults, they have their own money to, if they want to hire a pool out for an hour and a half, they can do so.
Yeah.
It just needs to be formally arranged through the club organizations or the county, and things like this can happen. I think it can be beneficial for all parties, taking the hard work that people's clubs do day to day and then merging it all together to show, the true character and, on the higher end of performance, what each individual, county, region, zone of the country can do.
No, I think it's real food for thought. I'm still keeping my membership with RTW, so as a country member, so whenever there are southeast based competitions that RTW are going to have a presence at, I'll go and swim for them and spend the day with them. And if ever I, go and visit, I've got friends down there now. If it aligns, I'll train with them. But obviously up here, I now swim for Matlock. So if there's any local competitions around here, I'll compete for Matlock. So that feels to me like a nice fair balance. But certainly food for thought. Listen, there's so much more that we could have gone into in this whole kind of topic, really. And I am keen to follow this up in future podcasts as well. I'd quite like to do a podcast actually on almost like imagine there were no associations, or you could make your own rules. Like, what would your ideal setup look like? And I think that'd be quite an interesting podcast actually. So something that I've got planned for the future. But I've got a final question for you, which is, and I appreciate this is quite a generic question, but based on a lot of the things that we've talked about today, what is sort of the one thing that you want to see change?
Oh, that is really tough, because I would love to say just maybe not accessibility, but the opportunities afforded to master swimmers, because I think if you give people the opportunities, the things that they can then do with those opportunities automatically lead to, maybe being a bit bolder in the headlines, shouting a bit louder, to have those extra opportunities that maybe as those who did swim as age groupers took for granted, like having that pool time, having those medal ceremonies, if you were fortunate enough to win medals as an age grouper at any competition, I'm pretty sure regionally, most regions present medals. Counties, I know for a fact in Northamptonshire, we were presented with medals in ceremonies and, winning trophies. And so I think as much as celebrating those who do achieve, is a really nice thing in terms of recognition. The percentage that do, win a medal at Masters Nationals is so few compared to those who come to training every day, or you use their life savings if you're, on the more elderly side, or your income if you're obviously still working to fund your passion. And I think that's something that sometimes, again, heading back to one of the first things I said, it's an absolute choice for people as master swimmers to dedicate their time and spend their money to come training at their clubs, even, swimming on their own. So I think, just recognizing that actually these people really do dedicate a lot to the sport of swimming. And I think as a whole, if that can be appreciated and recognized more, we can make more noise about it and take the community and, you know, not going to call it a separate sport, but the difference that master swimming is compared to age group swimming, and put it in the public eye just a little bit more.
No, I completely agree. And let's face it, we've got some incredible master swimmers. You know, I mean, just on this podcast alone, obviously we've had Helen Gorman on a few times. We're talking about a world record holder here. She's such an athlete. She's incredible, and it's people like her that deserve to be recognised a lot more than they are. I know she gets recognition in some ways, but not enough as far as I'm concerned. And she's one example of so many more that I could think of.
I was too young to really know much about her, but obviously Nicola, who's now on that European, you know, panel.
Yes.
She before it all, you know, went under, swam at Oundle, which was a mere 20 minutes away from me and away from Northampton. And, you know, people like that who, you know, really were insignificant at the time to me, or, you know, age group swimming in Northamptonshire, but lo and behold, she could have showed up, you know,
so
at 45 years of age and probably beaten most of the kids.
No, completely agree. Yeah,
things
definitely.
like that really put into perspective where master swimming is in a really good place, but doesn't quite get appreciated as much as it should.
Yeah, completely agree. There's lots more that we can do, and hopefully this podcast has been food for thought for people. And as I say, there'll be more podcasts around this topic moving forward. But Matt, thank you very much. That was really good. Really enjoyed that. And,
thanks for having me on, Joe. Really,
no, not a problem at all. And I hope that your studies obviously continue to go well. I'm sure we'll have you back on at some point in the future. And I look forward to meeting you when you fly back over. Yeah,
you too. Be great to be back on, and finally you know, extend my arm out into the masters swimming community back home.
Brilliant. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Joe.